Ever wonder what everyone's doing on their phones? They're banking with Bank of America. They're saving, planning, and budgeting all before dessert.
Digital tools so impressive, you just can't stop banking. What would you like the power to do?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much. We've got limited time, so let's get to it. And thanks to our panelists for being here today. You know, if you're a Detroiter, you know that we've got a shrine to innovation just a few miles down the road in the Henry Ford in Greenfield Village, a time when we celebrate Edison and the Wright brothers and Ford and all the other innovators. But I think there's a sense that when you look at what's happened over the past 30 years, a lot of that innovative spirit, a lot of that innovation has gone west. And it isn't even coming out of Europe or Asia, as Tony pointed out when we were talking backstage. It's gone to Silicon Valley. So a question that's kind of overarching here is, how can Detroit and how can Southeast Michigan become more like Silicon Valley and embrace that kind of innovation and generate that kind of innovation? I just came back from CES, and one of the things that was an overriding theme there, we watched hardcore automotive suppliers that were innovating into things that you just can't even imagine. AUO, which is out of Farmington Hills, has a flat panel display that they were showing impressionist art on, and you felt like you were going to be able to feel the brush strokes on it. It's not automotive. It's got nothing to do with their applications that they normally do, but it's something that they're innovating and they're using their talents and their resources to producing that they think is a good tech product. Same thing with Schaeffler. They make bearings, standard automotive bearings. And they're making joints now for humanoid robots, shoulders, elbows, knees, using the very engineering and manufacturing prowess that they have now. So how much of that is going on? What's the innovation story there? And Tony and Lisa, as our kind of manufacturers du jour here, embrace that for me. Tell me what else you're seeing and what you must do on a regular basis to innovate and stay current.
Yeah, let me, so one of the things that we've been doing is we've made a few investments in the venture capital space, and we think this is an important part of the formula. And what we do is we invest with a given fund. We see the deal flow that comes through that fund. We looked at 1,000 startups last year. I mean, we did the math on it. It was more than 1,000 startups we looked at, and it's a real needle in the haystack business. There's a handful that we're doing work with, but the idea is where do we find some innovation that happens outside the four walls of our building. And initially the thought process was, what can we find in the product space? And certainly, as a driveline supplier and an electric propulsion system provider, we're seeing innovation and technology related to those types of products, things like inverters and motor technology. But we're also seeing a lot related to manufacturing Industry X.0. So how do you leverage artificial intelligence to design your parts more efficiently and find design space that you might not see? Or how do you leverage robotics in your manufacturing operations? So that's a part of the formula that we've over the last couple of years have been spending some of our time and effort on, and I think we're early in that process, but we're learning a lot, and the collaborations that we've put in place and that we've started are really showing some benefits. So that's been a big part of the story for us.
And Lisa, in terms of co-partnering, recruiting, looking for those innovators, how's it going, and how much of your resources and your time is devoted to searching those people out?
Well, it's a full-time job, so we're constantly looking ahead. And as the CEO of GS3, that is my mission, to look ahead. I started a company years ago that was basically a software company, and then I got into manufacturing, and that was because we kept looking ahead. Now we're into the hydrogen space, because you have to look at the trends and see what's going to happen down the pike and get ready. Because though we have EVs, and I just want to be clear that fuel cells and PHEVs are part of that EV community. So you have to get ahead of it. And I think right now, as the automotives are moving, or everybody is moving into that direction of EVs, what is actually happening in the infrastructure to support it? And I'm going a little deeper than just a charging station. I am talking about what's happening in the ground, what's happening with the grid, what's happening with energy. Mm-hmm. And that has to be the focus in order to make these programs successful. So it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to develop a product that burns hydrogen and the tanks and the drive lines and whatnot. But if I still have range anxiety, or if I still believe that the car will explode if I have hydrogen on board, then nothing's going to happen. So we have to put those policies in place. We have to work with I work a lot with our customer and working again with policymakers. What are we doing with utilities? What are we doing with the government? What are we doing to put the policies in place so that these innovations can move forward?
Okay, and to that end, Glenn, if we think of ourselves as cultivators or farmers of innovation here in the state of Michigan, how's the crop growing? How are the seeds bursting forth? Is it spring in Michigan, or are we still in a winter?
No, we're doing well. We really are. In 2014, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article that said the future of the cars in Silicon Valley. I remember reading it, and that was a wake-up call, and we've been working really diligently on making sure that Michigan's not only an automotive center, but a next-generation mobility center. And there's a tremendous, Governor Snyder was on it, Governor Whitmer's been on it, and we've made a lot of progress. I mean, what's going on at New Lab right now is a prime example. What goes on at American Center for Mobility. But we need to fuel more new startups, and we need to draw them out of our traditional companies. There is a great new program that the MEDC and the OFME has around, it's called Changing Lanes, because there's so many ideas. We have so many engineers. They've got ideas, but we have to help them cultivate them. And that's in the companies and outside the companies.
Abass, as an innovator, as a startup at Red-E, how is the environment? How is the ecosystem? And as you try to look for co-partners, how receptive are the legacy automakers and suppliers that you try to engage?
I mean, I think it's been a huge help for us being in Detroit. Kind of, to be honest, on a national scale, it kind of instantly gave us street cred that we're an automotive thing. So people just kind of assume, you know, it kind of gives you the benefit of the doubt that you know the industry and you kind of have that experience behind you in your workforce. As far as like the environment here, it's definitely, you know, in the partnerships, that's something that I think could definitely be, you know, built on and encouraged. I do think.
When you knock, do they open?
Kind of, TBD. I definitely think there's a tendency to always, you know, go with the safe bet because these are, you know, large entities with a big reputation. And I think, but if you want to foster that kind of innovation, you have to take, you kind of have to put your money where your mouth is. If you want to have that talent, you want to have those things all around you, you're going to have to take the bet and partner with those other companies that maybe not have, you know, the huge bonding or with this and that. Those are the things that can be hurdles for a small business. But you know, you got to help them kind of get across there if you want that environment around you.
We know that sometimes doing things differently is hard for the legacy corporations here in Detroit. He made an allusion to the safe bet. Draw the parallels between the mindset in Silicon Valley versus the mindset here in Detroit when it comes to safe bets, risk aversion, risk taking, and embracing failure. And is there a short versus long-term thinking problem here? And Tony, I'll start with you.
Yeah, a few comments I would make. First of all, you know, a company can only be successful if it's meeting its shareholders, you know, profit requirements, and it's meeting its customers' needs, you know, and there's not always a lot of room for innovation in that formula, right? And we've built for good reason, a culture around reliability, around producing products. You know, we make one car a minute in an assembly plant. There's thousands and thousands of pieces that have to come together, and every one of them has to work. And that requires a certain mindset and a certain culture. And that is not, you know, a culture of fail fast and a culture of let's take risk, right? It just doesn't work in that environment. And I think that's where, you know, we have to think about how do we create an ecosystem of startups, for example, to help with that. And I think that's really where you know, the startup culture can help. There's certainly differences when your product is scaling atoms and molecules and hard parts versus scaling bits, like Silicon Valley does. But I do think that we have to think about the mindset and how do we generate, you know, that fail-fast mentality so we can get more innovation. And there's a lot of work that's happening around this. A lot of work that Glenn's team is doing, and the startup, you know, communities that are being built here, and VC funds like Assembly Ventures, you know, and Fontanalis. So there's the grassroots are there, and it's starting to build, and we need more of that in the ecosystem.
And Lisa, we've seen instances, and I think the pandemic was a beautiful example, where we saw Ford and GM pivot to the making of suits, to the making of ventilators and things like that. We know they've got the ability to adapt and change based on circumstance. But what do we need to do better? And what do we need maybe to set aside that's old thinking in order to be more like the folks in Silicon Valley?
Well, I think in Silicon Valley is about the innovation, right? It's innovation first, labor second. And I might be saying a bad word or a bad term here, but I think that Silicon Valley is interested in the innovation. I look at what's happening here, and we talk about it all the time, but we don't necessarily do anything about it. We put New Lab in place. We got Michigan Central in place. We got startups that have the technology, but then they're not being bubbled up, so to speak, you know, into that, let's see what this looks like. You know, how can we get behind this and make this happen? And I really start believing that maybe we talk about it so much and we believe that it's happening that maybe I'm jaded to the point that I think that there's something wrong, that it's not being bubbled up. And I look at policies and I say, are the policies ripe for a startup community? Are we truly about promoting the startup community? And is it really about the technology that the technology first, or is it about job creation first? And being on the receiving end of that, a lot of times I feel like it's the job creation first. When I was, when our team and other groups are presenting an idea of how we can automate a particular line or get something, do something a little bit better, I'm always asked, well, how many people will it employ? And I'm like, it's the innovation. I'm going for the innovation. I just need you to see the innovation. And that's where I think I'm jaded, okay? And it might not be the whole community, but I do feel like I get a stutter stop, so to speak. And when I'm looking at, you know, when everyone was up in arms about GM Cruise, you know, going, not continuing.
I'll plead guilty.
Okay. And I got to admit, I wasn't upset
because
about it.
I perceived it and interpreted it as, okay, we don't have the patience for this to bear fruit.
But here's the thing, they are a automaker, right? They make the car, the technology to make the conveyance, the business of conveyance. Cruise is about the business of moving people around. There could be an entire business ecosystem built around that, of what Cruise has developed. And I think that's part of the problem. We're not looking at innovation in a different way. It's the same way. When I'm looking at Ready, and I see what they have, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, now how can I elevate that? How can I use that to create another business model? He's developed the tools. Now, how do I take the tools and I make the tools work? Whether it's inside of the automotive, because we're already talking about what's developed in automotive, we can now move into other industries and make those industries better. So we have that opportunity to do that, and I think that's where we get stuck. I think that's really where we get stuck.
Abass, we have the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that was, I think Michigan got $110 million out of a pie to put more chargers out there. That came in 21. In July of 24, there's kind of a look back and said, okay, it's been 3 years, where are the chargers? That's not on you, but it does beg some questions. When it comes to innovation, did we stumble, or what have we learned about bringing that innovation to market?
I think there's a lot of other things that have helped bring, you know, EV charging and build out the infrastructure. With that program in particular, obviously it's federal funds, and so, and you're asking states to write, you know, proposal RFPs and things for like a very kind of technology that they're not necessarily equipped to talk about. So there was a time period where they have to build out the documentation and they have to vet it. So a lot of it was just, you know, legal and, you know, frameworks that the states had to kind of quickly learn and adapt to. So it was really more on that side. I don't think that any time lag was because of anything else, right? There's obviously utility coordination and things. There's a lot of moving parts. I think that it's kind of very valid why it takes some time. The stuff that does go fast, and I think is actually the really cornerstone of it, is the utility side. That's been a huge help, but also it's like, that's what's integrating. It's it's kind of changing like fueling in a way, and I think that's also a huge opportunity for innovation because, and it links here with the automotive. If we're doing EVs, you're building battery packs. How are those batteries? Can they be used to do grid resilience and demand response and have a smarter grid, which is something that's needed. So all those pieces intertwine, and I think that's kind of where the opportunity is and less on like the federal funding. It's only a small piece of that.
During the auto show, we did a lot of broadcasts from Huntington Place, and as I professed my affection for EVs and the fun-to-drive aspect of them, I got a boatload of venomous tweets and X's and from people saying, well, you're nothing but a shill for the green energy scam, yada, yada, yada. People can't separate, apparently, the product from the politics surrounding the product. How concerned are you about the politicization of innovation and the politicization of, I mean, we could see this with AI, we've certainly seen it with EVs. How much can that hold us back?
I mean, I do think it's holding us back now. I think in the long run, I mean, I'm a big, kind of just like he was saying, I have a bunch of classic cars.
Yeah, I'm an agnostic. Anything that's fun,
but I think there was a point, it's just culturally right now, that's the way it is. And I think when something is inherently, when people drive it, they feel different when they use it. It's just getting over it, and you're already seeing it go with the adoption. Like we see like the growth from last year to this year, just the usage per day, the utilization on charging stations, and how much that's growing, and kind of like the stigma comes down. First it's like, oh, it's my second car. That'll just be our local. Then we have our road trip car, and then they realize, okay, well actually we don't even road trip that much, and actually when we do, it's fine. And I think it's just natural that there's kind of like that pushback, and I think over time, it'll go away. Yeah.
Yeah, experience helps certainly. That first contact when you feel the fun to drive. Glenn, there's so many things under the heading of innovation: AI, robotics, autonomy, software-based vehicles. What do you see as maybe the richest vein that we need to be mining?
All the above. So just to pick up on your last point, what Sandy said, lead or lag. If we want to lead and be at the forefront, and that's a mindset too, and that's our political leaders too, then that's the only option. Lagging is just not an option. That's a death knell. So to your point, when you look at innovation, Doug Song gave me a book last year called The Rainforest. And he said, read this book. This is why Silicon Valley happened. This is why Research Triangle. This is why Shanghai is happening. And it's critical ingredients. And I think that the automotive industry is a great platform for diversification, not to diversify away from it. I get kind of tired of that expression. And there's three things. And one of them was a huge step recently, this innovation fund that we just signed. Mm-hmm. I mean, what if we tenfold that like Ohio has done, which is what we should do over the next few years? Secondly, it's about helping Abass grow his business because he needs customers, he needs information, and he needs talent. And the last point I'd make is what Richard talked about. If we're losing that 20% of that high-tech talent, that's what makes the whole thing go. So we want these young engineers or people who reskill to bounce between a Bedrock FinTech and Ford and New Lab. That's what happens in Silicon Valley, and we need that here.
Tony, AI was a huge buzzword at CES, and I mean, we had electric shavers claiming that they had AI in them. I have no idea how that's going to benefit my face. But as you look at AI, we think about it in automotive context as being about autonomy. It's not. It's about much more than that. Kind of roll out what the promise is there.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of interesting areas where AI can come into play. Everything from using large language models to decompose requirements for engineering products, to using neural networks to design products. We've had some real success in finding design space and designs that we wouldn't have been able to come up with using our traditional methods that produce products that have better attributes, better efficiency, or lower mass, because quality. We're able to look at a bigger range of products. And then using neural networks for quality, for defect detection, or even using large language models for helping to upskill our associates. So there's a lot of different places that we're seeing where AI can be beneficial in back office functions. That really surprised us a little bit, and we're really seeing some valuable applications in our business.
Lisa, in terms of the talent piece here, certainly we have the engineering talent, we've got the manufacturing experience and might. Do we have the software basis that we need in order to make this leap and to be an innovation hub? Where do you see the deficiencies from the talent standpoint? and tie that back to our university corridor partners and whether we're leveraging them as well as we should.
Well, I think in developing the talent, we have to look at a different way of developing the talent. You know, we're looking at maybe the traditional way of saying a certification program takes about, 10, 15 weeks. It's from 8 to 5 or something like that. But the talent that you're trying to tap or the people that you are trying to tap do not have 8 to 5 to give when they're trying to put food on the table. So you have to look at a different way of training or reaching that particular talent to really engage that community and get what we want. As far as software is concerned, I know software talent does exist here. You know, is the software talent being used or being challenged in a way that we should be challenging, you know, to develop new products for automotive and outside of automotive? I'm looking at, you know, Abass here, and I would say yes, and I would say that there are more kids that are out there looking at software. They are engaging software. It looks different for them than it did for us. You know, I'm an old head. So joysticks and gaming and all of that kind of stuff are very new to me. But if you got a kid that is engaging that way, and they are learning that way, and they're learning critical thinking that way, why not change the way that we do the training to engage that?
There you go.
And I think that's what we have to do in order to develop the talent.
All right, in the words of the immortal Rocky Balboa, we all have gaps. Let's wave the magic wand. Abass, I want to start with you because we've only got 2 minutes left. If you could wave your magic wand, what's the one gap you see Michigan needs to fill to be a better innovation hub and ecosystem?
Funding. I think that's what drove Silicon Valley. That's why everybody goes to Austin now. And it's if people flock to the money because they think they're going to be able to get it. You got to start up. There's somebody there.
And what's the obstacle to that money flowing better in this environment?
I think, you know, like VCs and having that kind of like infrastructure and things. There's some here, but when you look at the volume, I mean, most of it's not. Most of it's other places, but the companies have it. And so I think being more adventurous with it, if you want that environment around you, you know, creating VC funds or kind of split arms and really doing more of that, people follow the money.
Okay, Glenn, wave the wand.
I'm just going to go with pathways for our people. You know, we talk a lot about talent, but they need to see that there's opportunity. And that means a kid in Ishpeming, or if you've been to Black Tech Saturdays, which I've done, and you can see how it's done and you can get motivated to do it, I think the pathways we provide our people is going to be the key to unlocking Michigan for the future.
And Tony.
I would say entrepreneurship. I'd love to see, our graduates from the local universities, the first thing that they think about doing when they graduate is how do I start a startup company and make some, impact in the world. And it would be, that kind of culture, building on that kind of culture, I think would be very helpful.
All right. Thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you. And once again, we've done this before, and we can do it again. And it's about kind of changing our mindset and adapting and also embracing that risk and people like Abass. Thanks very much. And thank you.
Ever wonder what everyone's doing on their phones? They're banking with Bank of America. They're saving, planning, and budgeting all before dessert.
Digital tools so impressive, you just can't stop banking. What would you like the power to do?